Rapunzel, a classic fairy tale. There was once a man and a woman who had long in vain wished for a child. At length the woman hoped that she was about to have their desire fulfilled. These people had a little window in the back of their house, from which a splendid garden could be seen, which was full of the most beautiful flowers, vegetables, herbs, and fruits. It was, however, surrounded by a high wall and owned by an enchantress with great power who was feared and dreaded by all the world. One day the woman was sitting by this window, and she looked down into the garden, where she saw a bed that was planted with the most beautiful rampions she had ever seen, and it looked so fresh and green and good that she longed for it with all the cravings of a pregnancy. And her desire was so great and increased every day that she pined away, and she knew she could not get any. She became pale and miserable because of this throughout the weeks. Her husband, noticing her declining health, was alarmed and asked, "What ails you, my dear wife? How may I help you?" "Ah," she replied, "if I cannot get some of that rampion that is in the garden beyond our house to eat before our child is due, I shall die before I birth her." The man, who loves his wife very dearly, thought, "Sooner than let your beloved die, than to go into the garden and get some of the rampion. Let it cost you what you will. Your wife and your child matter more than that." In the twilight of that evening, he climbed down over the wall into the garden of the enchantress, hastily clutched a handful of rampion, and took it back to his wife. She made of it immediately a salad, and she felt it nourish her so greatly, and she ate it with so much relish that she craved it even more than the next day. She could feel the child within her begging for more of it, and she longed for it 3 times more than before. If he was to have any rest, her husband must go back into the garden in the gloom of the evening and grab more of it. So he clambered down the wall, even though he was terribly afraid. He then saw the enchantress standing before him. "How can you dare," she said with an angry look, "to descend into my garden and steal my rampion like a thief? You shall suffer for it." "Ah!" he said, "let mercy take the place of justice. I only made up my mind to do it out of necessity. My wife, she saw your rampion from the window in our house. She is pregnant. The child and she longed for it. She told me that she would die before birthing our child if I did not bring her some." And the witch's heart was softened only a little, and she said to him, "If that be the case, I will let you take as much rampion as you will. I make only one condition. You must give me the child your wife will bring into the world. I will treat it well and care for her like a mother." The man, in his absolute terror, consented to everything, too afraid to really know what she was saying. And when the little one came to them, the enchantress appeared at once and gave the child the name of Rapunzel. Just as she was about to take her away, the man and the woman begged for their child, the man realizing in his horror what he had promised her. The witch saw their rather annoying desire for a child, and allowed them to have 3 more children. And for every birth of these children that would come into their world, a little bit of the memory of their firstborn would vanish. Therefore they would not feel the pain of her leaving them by the time they had born their 3rd. And so it was. She took the child away after placing this spell, and young Rapunzel grew in the witch's house, kept out of the garden out of sight of her parents. And when she was 12, she grew into the most beautiful child beneath the sun, and was moved into a tower the witch had prepared. And as soon as she was in the room, the witch cast a spell which caused the tower's door and stairway to vanish, leaving a large room in which the child was to live at the top of the tower. At the side of this room in which Rapunzel lived was a large window that looked more like a door, and there was an enormous hook outside of it. So if the witch wanted to come and visit, she placed herself beneath this window and called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair, that I might climb the golden stair." Now Rapunzel had magnificent blonde hair, as bright and shining and fine as spun gold, and the witch had increased its growing by 10-fold, so that by the time she was 12, it fell down the length of the tower, 70 feet long. So whenever the witch cried out this, She would fasten the braids she kept the hair in to keep it neat around this great hook, and let it fall for 70 metres down, and for which the witch climbed up. And many years passed, and Rapunzel was lonely. She learnt how to sing in her isolation. From the birds and the wind that rustled in the trees, the tower was covered in the middle of a valley, and the wood and the hills did quiet her voice a tiny part, but it still echoed off the hills and allowed her voice to resound out of her, so that part of her was free, while the rest of her was not caged within the tower. And even though she did feel a tiny bit trapped, she had no true memories of her life before her life with the witch, so she felt like this was the only home she'd ever known. The witch tried to teach her magic and gave her one magical gift every year for her birthday, one of which was magical tears that helped heal her, for Rapunzel had cut her hand accidentally one day when the witch was gone, leaving a rather large puddle of blood, and the witch alarmed the witch. Another one was her hair. It was nigh unbreakable, only able to be cut by the witch herself. And so on and so forth. Rapunzel had subtle magical gifts, but she never really learned how to be a witch herself. After all these years, a young prince by the name of Justin was separated from his hunting troop and could hear the singing echoing off the mountains that came from somewhere in the village. So he travelled out of the village and into the woods to find the voice. And in his free time he would stand by the mountains in the meadows and would simply listen, drinking in the voice that was so beautiful he could not help but stand and stare around him in surprise, trying to find where it came from. And so he spent weeks looking for it, calling out, and sometimes when the singing got loud, as if the person had heard him, it would stop, and he wouldn't be able to find her again. This way that the young prince came to Rapunzel's tower and heard her singing again. And again he hid to see that there was no door, which very much confused him, and he heard someone coming and hid deeper into the underbrush. Luckily his brown cloak hid him from view. He saw the witch come over, and standing under the window he had spotted, he heard how she cried out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair, that I might climb the golden stair." And then he watched as the most beautiful maiden he had ever beheld appeared in the window, smiling down at the woman, calling, "I will be there in a moment, good mother." He watched as the magnificent hair, brighter than the gold of his father's crown and his mother's hair when she was younger, fell down like a shimmering waterfall, like woven sunbeams down the tower, and watched as the witch slowly clambered her way up. Staring in complete amazement, he waited until the woman had vanished from sight and sat back in the underbrush, almost dazed with how much he had grown to love this maiden already. The sweet voice, the kind way she had called down, how true her smile was, the mystery of why she was in a tower with no stairs or doorway. He was quite smitten. And in his daze he thought, if this be the ladder for which one must climb, I will try my luck. And the next day, when it came to be dark, he went back to the tower and called up, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair, that I might climb the golden stair," in a passable imitation of the witch's voice, and immediately the golden hair fell down, and he climbed up it, feeling the silken tresses beneath his fingers. At first Rapunzel was afraid, because she had never seen him before, but then he spoke kindly to her. "Do not be afraid. Please, I will not hurt you. I have been trying to find your voice for weeks. I've heard you singing in the woods. I had to see you. I simply wish for answers. Please tell me, what is your name?" Rapunzel. "What is yours?" "I am Prince Justin," he replied with a bow. "A prince?" she asked curiously. "Oh, I know. My mother left me some history books. That would mean you are the heir to this land?" "Yes, and where do you originate from?" He was pleasantly surprised by her intelligence. "My mother brought me here," Rapunzel replied. "She always told me that many people would want to take me from her, so she tucked me away up here to keep me safe." "May I ask, Madam Rapunzel, why are there no doors or stairways? Why are you trapped up here?" "I am not trapped," she said with a small smile. "I'm merely protected. The tower is the only thing separating me from the world, and I am afraid of the world, even though it is beautiful. for there are wolves and monsters, people that would hurt me. Justin could tell this was all she had ever been told. Do I have your permission to come back and visit you? He asked. Rapunzel stared at him, shocked. You have your answers, though, Your Highness. Why would you want to come back? I would like to see you again. And I cannot very well leave you with a witch. She is not a witch. She is an enchantress, and she is my mother. Prince Justin decided not to discuss this for now, and so they talked and talked into the night, and found that they had a very similar humour, and easily able to make each other laugh, and little by little Rapunzel lost her fear. And throughout the months he came to visit again and again, and eventually they became very close. He would offer to bring her things, but she always refused whenever he brought her a nice trinket, like a new necklace, and once a dress. She simply said, if she sees that I have something that she herself has not brought me, she will know that you're coming. She'll know that someone's coming in here. I can't let that happen. I don't want her to stop you coming in. There are thorns below, and I don't want her to hurt you. She's very protective of me, like a mother bear protecting her cub. But if you do wish to bring me something, maybe some food I have not tried before, and you may take whatever you brought it in with you back with you so that she will not know I have had it. He agreed and brought her sweets and small things to eat and drink, and throughout their months spent together, their love slowly began to blossom like the flowers that climbed up the tower. One day, almost half a year after he started visiting her, one day he plucked up the courage and asked her to be his wife. And she looked at him and saw again how handsome he was, and thought, he will love me far more than old mother. For over the months she realised that she was truly trapped in a cage, and wanted to stay with him and see the world rather than be locked in a tower the rest of her life. I don't think it's a good plan for me to leave immediately, but I have an idea. Every time you will come, please bring me a piece of silk. With the silk, which I can hide under my bed easily, I can tie a ladder that I can easily hide. And when it is ready, I will descend down this tower, and you can take me away on your horse. Ever since you first came, I wanted to learn how to ride. They agreed, and every week when he visited, he brought her a length of fine, strong silk that she hid beneath her mattress, and bit by bit she began to make the ladder. One day, Rapunzel was so busy daydreaming about her adventures in the future with her beloved, when the witch began to climb up, she completely forgot herself and asked, Good mother, how is it you are so much heavier to draw up than the prince? He is with me in an instant. Oh, you wicked child, the enchantress cried out. What do I hear you say? I thought I kept you from the world, and you have deceived me. Your love was only ever for me. She stormed into the tower and struck Rapunzel across the face, sending her sprawling on the floor. Mother! She cried out in pain and shock, clasping her face. Mother! Mother! I am not your mother, you pathetic girl. Your real parents live next door to my old home, and were always whinging and whining for a baby. So, when your real mother was carrying you, I bewitched her to have cravings for my rampion. And in exchange for their greens, I demanded you for them annoying me so much. I was even kind enough to let them have more children, and remove their memories of you. I wanted your love only for myself. You belonged to me alone. Rapunzel was in shock at the truth, unable to comprehend what she had just heard. In her anger, the witch clutched Rapunzel's stunningly beautiful tresses, wrapped the braids twice around her left hand, and seized a pair of scissors with the right, and snip, snap, they were cut off, and the lovely braids lay on the ground like dead things. And she was so pitiless that she took Rapunzel away into a desert and left the poor young woman alone in her misery. On the same day that she cast out Rapunzel, the witch waited until evening and tied the braids to a hook just above the window, and then she heard Prince Justin come and say, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair, that I might climb the golden stair. She tossed the hair out of the window, and when Justin climbed up to find his dear wife-to-be, and instead found the witch glaring at him with venomous and dark looks. Ha ha, she mocked. You have come to fetch your sweet one. But the lovely bird sits no longer singing in her nest, for the cat has got it, torn off her wings, and will scratch out your eyes as well. Rapunzel is lost to you, and you will never see her again." Justin was beside himself with pain and despair at losing his beloved, that he stumbled back in shock and horror. The witch pushed him and he fell out of the window and landed in the sharp thorns below. He escaped with his life, but the thorns had scratched his eyes badly and left him bleeding and blind. He wandered in the woods, unable to see, with only a rag to try to stem the blood tied around his face. He ate little but roots and berries, and did nothing but lament and weep the loss of his dearly betrothed. He roamed over the mountains and through rivers, knowing this land well even though he could not see it, searching and searching for his beloved. And eventually he came to the edge of the desert where Rapunzel was living in wretchedness. He heard a sweet voice, singing a song so hauntingly familiar that it called out to his very soul. "Rapunzel!" he cried out, staggering towards her. "Justin!" She ran into his arms but had to catch him as he fell. "What did she do to you?" "My dear bride," he said, "I am blind. She pushed me down, like you said, the thorns." And Rapunzel wept, but she quickly gathered some of her tears on the rag covering his eyes and gently wiped all the scratches, and little by little they healed, until his eyes were healed and hers red with tears of joy. He could see his beloved again, and realizing her tears had healed his sight, he tenderly stroked the last ones off her cheeks and gently put them on her head, allowing her hair to regrow somewhat until it reached her waist in a shimmering golden curtain once more. They embraced tightly at their reunion, kissing one another passionately. At that moment the witch's magic broke, destroyed by the power of a selfless love, rather than the possessive love she thought she had for Rapunzel. The true parents' memories of their eldest came flooding back, and they quickly gathered their younger children and headed to the castle to ask the king and queen for help in finding their daughter. Justin and Rapunzel eventually made their way back to the kingdom, where the subjects rejoiced at his return. The king and queen were relieved to see their son returned, and with such a beautiful bride, and brought her true family forward. At last they were reunited with their daughter, and she was so happy at meeting her true parents and younger siblings. Rapunzel and Prince Justin were married in a truly beautiful ceremony, with her father giving her away, and her family were allowed to live in the palace, and they all lived happily ever after, apart from the witch, who stayed locked in the tower for the rest of her days. The end.